and see how game one between Alejandro and Daniel is going to play out. There's going to be the Glastria and the Indeedee jumping out for Alejandro's side of the field. On the opposing side though for Daniel, we have got the Indeedee and the Thunderous. So an Indeedee apiece, lots of redirection potential here, but I want to see what this Glastria and Thunderous are going to be able to do.
Yeah, you know, the Indeedee's coming out makes a lot of sense. It gives whatever partnering beside it has that redirection support with the Follow Me, or it gives support in an offensive presence with the Helping Hand that we know it can and does often carry. The Glastria here is a really, you know, it's something that Alejandro's changed on his team from the region finals, and an interesting one because it gives him a really good offensive option against something like the Thunderous that could otherwise be a little bit more difficult to deal with if you're leading with your Shadow Rider Calyrex. So the Thunderous instantly in an awkward position here where it probably wants to maybe switch out, or really for Daniel to take full advantage of that redirection support that the Indeedee is providing if you want to go down a max route with Thunderous. But I mean, doing that is risky in itself because your Indeedee is only going to be able to take so many hits before the Thunderous is then becoming that prime target for the Glastria, if that is what Alejandro decides to go down.
Well, it's going to be an early Dynamax here coming out for Daniel's side of the field. Going to be that Thunderous coming out into the action. And this is where things can start getting interesting with things like speed control. You could go for those max airstreams coming off a move like Fly. I'm going to be boosting up the speed on your side of the field. Also, you could also go for something like those... based off the fighting type moves and try and boosting up sort of with the max knuckle, try and boost up your attack a little bit more. Thunderous often running that kind of defiant ability, maybe wanted to try and catch potential intimidate. Not going to be happening in this particular turn 0, so maybe if you're Dynamaxing up your Thunderous, you want to try and capitalize on that. Alejandro, however, going to be Dynamaxing up the Glastria, and I'm really interested to see how this is going to play out, because normally we see Glastria in kind of a Trick Room matchup, so to be coming out here in kind of turn 1, looking forward to seeing what it's capable of. It is going to be the max airstream, however, coming out from that Thunderous, targeting right down into the Glastria. Notably, the Indeedee on Alejandro's side has not gone for any redirection, so there's no Follow Me coming out from that side, compared to the one on Daniel's side that's going to be able to redirect this mystical fire coming out from the Indeedee on Alejandro's side. I wonder if that was maybe going for a weakness policy side activation, Lee.
Yeah, you would imagine so, Lou. I think that's a really good call from yourself. And like you were saying about the Thunderous here, you kind of, if you are Daniel, you want to be going for those max knuckles predominantly. You know, getting the airstream in here right now is great, but the fact is that you want to try and get those attack stats boosted as much as possible. We know how powerful something like Glastria can be, and predominantly you do see it in Trick Room environments, so it's interesting to see it here without Trick Room support, and not even really supported by any sort of Trick Room on Alejandro's side of the field. But it is doing enough. That big knockout there onto the Indeedee is pretty big, because you've got no redirection, you've got no kind of protection now for the Thunderous, unless you can bring something in being the Cinderace or the Calyrex to really be able to knock it out before the Thunderous is hit. Otherwise, you're in a little bit of an awkward position.
Yeah, I mean, amazing play there from Alejandro, removing the Indeedee from the field, but I think critically as well, getting that +1 boost on the Glastria just makes it a lot more formidable going forward. The fact that Alejandro still has his Indeedee as well means that he does have access to that redirection, so whatever Pokemon Daniel's able to bring in, Indeedee might be able to protect that Glastria for a turn or two as well. It is going to be the Calyrex coming into the fray, and this is again where I really like Indeedee as a Pokemon option here, because the Astral Barrage isn't going to affect Indeedee with its normal typing.
No, and it kind of gives it a little bit of freedom to go for maybe a Mystical Fire if it wants to onto the Calyrex, you know, if it's really worried about it there. But I don't think there's really any need. I think what you probably want to do for your Alejandro is just go for that redirection, take the attack from the Thunderous because you know it's going to be hitting before the Calyrex, and then just make sure that your Glastria is not taking too much damage and going to be able to probably pick up a return knockout onto the opposing Calyrex on Daniel's side of the field, because that's the big thing for the Glastria now. You know, it's got that attack boost, it wants to be picking up knockouts, and the Thunderous may be able to do some good damage to the Indeedee if it's got max darkness or something like that. It would be useful to lower the special defensive stats on that side of the field, but if it's not present, then it makes the decisions very difficult going into this next turn.
Or you can see Daniel really agonizing over which Pokemon to target down with the Thunderous there, taking it down right down to the last second. Indeedee, however, on Alejandro's side, going to go for that redirection with the Follow Me, and Thunderous is going to go for the max airstream. Going to be targeted down into that Indeedee, doing a decent chunk of damage, taking it just below 50% HP. So it's going to be interesting to see if if the Calyrex maybe has gone for a move that is going to be able to connect onto the DD, and if it is going to be enough, and it is indeed going to be able to do some decent damage to the Glastria as well, but Glastria able to survive out this turn. Calyrex, however, critically getting that Grimnay boost, making itself that threat on the field, particularly with the speed advantage that it's got. It's naturally speedy, but then it's also taken that max airstream boost. Thunderous, however, is going to have to take this max Hailstorm, and it is a very solid one-hit KO against it there, Lee.
Yeah, big knockout taking down the Thunderous. And I'm a little bit surprised he didn't go after the Calyrex there, because I feel like out of both Pokemon on Daniel's side of the field, the Calyrex is definitely the more threatening of the two, you know. The expanding force there from Daniel was a really nice play, you know, taking advantage of the terrain, but making sure that you can get rid of the redirection support as well, which is a kind of what Glastria's success in the first few turns is all hinged on. So removing that, like, you know, Alejandro removed Daniel's, opens this matchup completely. But we are going to see the Whimsicott now hit the field for Alejandro, and that additional speed control that he's got, we did say at the very beginning of this match, it's very important. And the one thing that Whimsicott can provide Alejandro's side is that instant tailwind through its prankster ability.
There's so many speed calculations going through my head right now, Lee. It's so difficult to keep track. Calyrex naturally speedy anyway, but it's got that +1 boost. Whimsicott joining the field can go for that tailwind and double up the speed on Alejandro's side. But Glastria is the interesting one. It's normally quite a slow Pokemon. The fact that Alejandro's let it out here without any Trick Room could indicate that it is maybe built to be speedy, but is it going to be enough in a tailwind to maybe outspeed that Calyrex? And Calyrex at +1, having access to the Astral Barrage at this point, there's no more in DD to not take that attack. That's going to really hurt the Glastria and the Whimsicott.
Yeah, even with the fastest of Glastrias that you could get, even in a tailwind environment, it's still not going to be able to outspeed either the Cinderace or this Calyrex. But between the two, have you got enough to take down the Glastria? And you probably do, but we're going to see the Cinderace just go for the bounce here, going to avoid any damage this turn, as the Shadow Rider Calyrex does protect from any sort of max Hailstorm damage this turn.
Yeah, and the Cinderace avoiding that damage as well. And I really like this play here by Daniel, actually going for the bounce. It means that you get out of the action and waste one of the max turns from Alejandro, because it's either going to go into the Cinderace that's not on the field or go into the protecting Calyrex there. Whimsicott has had its focus sash chipped away by that hail, so that bounce, if it's targeting down into that Whimsicott, will be able to remove it from the field. So it's a nice play there from Daniel. It's now going to be, I think, up to this Calyrex to try and remove the Glastria from play.
Yeah, and now you can see the Moonblast going to hit first. Does it get the special attack drop? Because if it does, that's pretty huge.
Ooh.
And we see it, Lou. We see the special attack drop, so that's big for Alejandro here. Reducing the attack damage of what this opposing Calyrex can do. Not enough, though, for either of the Glastria or the Whimsicott to hang on. And the Cinderace left hanging, about to come down on that bounce.
Oh, that Cinderace is going to bounce back down to absolutely nothing. It basically just, you know, jumped out of the action and let Calyrex just handle things, getting that critical double KO. But it's nice here for Daniel as well to have the Cinderace back into play, depending on what the last remaining Pokemon from Alejandro is. To be able to utilize both your Pokemon here could be the critical way to seal up game one.
Yeah, it's got to be the Shadow Rider Calyrex on his side. You know, Alejandro has to bring that out. Problem is, he's not got as many turns of probably Tailwind as he would have liked to. And knowing, you know, Daniel has got a +1 speed already on his Calyrex, so he can quite happily just protect here. And will that be enough to stall out the Tailwind? There's 2 turns of it. He's going to need a double protect here. The other thing to think about is, does the Cinderace have something like Sucker Punch? If it does, then it has to stall out this Psychic Terrain as well. There's probably only 1 turn of Psychic Terrain here. But, you know, is it going to be able to utilize that? But turning into the Dog type alone, potentially, could be a lifeline for Daniel going forward in this match.
Yeah, that's the thing, the kind of terrain environment as well, kind of playing into some strategies here. The Calyrex goes for a protect here. Sucker Punch does come out from the Cinderace there, but just forgetting about the psychic terrain. But I think coming into that dark type, using that Libero ability, could help it out from taking this ghost type attack here. As you mentioned, Lee, it could certainly be what that Cinderace needs to be able to take this. And it does, able to survive here on 9 HP. It is a critical hit, though. Oh, is the hail still going to be in effect?
It should be in effect here as the Cinderace it stops as well. Oh, it's perfect timing here for Daniel as the Psychic Terrain disappears from the field as well. We are going to see the Cinderace in a position now to be able to go for that Sucker Punch, pick up the knockout onto the opposing Calyrex on Alejandro's side of the field. And like, you know, this has been explosive backwards and forwards this whole match, but the way Daniel's kind of managed this end game has been very, very good, making it very difficult for Alejandro, even though he gets his tailwind up with the Whimsicott, to, you know, just be in a position where the Cinderace is coming out and being able to close this one up for him.
Oh,
Fantastic.
that was a wild ride for those last couple of turns. Absolutely amazing by Daniel, having that Cinderace, preserving it so well, even with the bounce turns, going for the Sucker Punch in the terrain, knowing that the ability will still, you know, change even though you won't be able to execute the move. It was just amazing being able to survive that, even with a critical hit, and then the hail ending at the same time, the Psychic Terrain going away. It was just amazing. You didn't even have to kind of stall out the Tailwind turns if you have access to a move like Sucker Punch. So absolutely brilliantly played. I wasn't expecting that. The game was sort of toing and froing, and Alejandro had such a nice strong advantage with that Glastrier early on, but then Calyrex Shadow Rider does it again and just surprises us.
Yeah, it definitely comes back, and like you say, it was almost like everything was perfectly timed. When the hail ends, when the Psychic Terrain ends, the use of the Librero ability as well on the Cinderace, you know, sometimes I think the knowledge there is really understated, knowing that you think, oh, the Psychic Terrain's up, Sucker Punch is going to fail, so I'll not be able to get my Librero ability to change typing to the Dog typing, which is what I need right now. Even if the move fails, it's going to allow me to take the Astral Barrage. But knowing that the Librero activates before the move actually takes place, that, you know, that in itself is a big call there for, and showing how really well versed in the, maybe in a mirror environment that Daniel is against this opposing Shadow Rider Calyrex, because he managed that end game really well, you know, utilized the Thunderous in a way where it wasn't really doing too much, but got that really important +1 onto the Calyrex, which just gave him a little bit of edge going into that last few turns, because if the Tailwind ended there, he got a double protect, it was like another way for him to win that game. Phenomenal, really great match for us to go into with both great restricted Pokemon in the Shadow Rider Calyrex.
Yeah, it was amazing, and also seeing both the players lead out with Indeedee in that game one, I think was really interesting, because you start having those kind of mind games with the redirection, or do you want to maybe do some chip damage, and particularly seeing on the opposing side, you've got that Mystical Fire weakness policy combination that, you know, it's open team sheets. Daniel would have been aware of that being a combination. I think that shows why going for that follow me so early on just stopped the Glastrier from being able to really set up early on, but Alejandro was still able to build momentum with it. So going into game two, I think Daniel still has to watch out for that being a potential combination.
Yeah, definitely, and that in itself was just, you know, just mitigation against that setup, because if the weakness policy is activated there, then it could get too far out of control for Daniel to actually come back. But Lou, let's not hang around anymore. Let's get straight into this game two and get started with the next match in this set.
Yeah, I can't wait for this. It's going to be the Glastrier and the Indeedee once again out here for Alejandro, whereas on Daniel's side of the field, we've got Indeedee and Thunderous once again, so exactly the same leads as game one. I wonder if they're going to play out the same way, though.
Well, you would say that probably from Daniel's side of the field, there's no harm in going for the follow me and then the airstream again, because you know, you're getting the benefit of that speed boost, and you're preventing a potential weakness policy coming out from the Mystic Fire onto the Glastrier here. So beneficial just to go for that. But it will be interesting to see if Alejandro maybe plays it slightly differently here, because do you still max your Glastrier? It didn't work out too bad for him in that first game, but you know, being able to remove the Indeedee turn one made things a lot easier for him. So it might play out the same. Daniel might want to preserve that Indeedee for a little bit later on, though. But if you do that, it does risk the Mystic Fire going on to the Glastrier, and it does leave your Thunderous a bit more susceptible to getting hit by a big max hailstorm that would just knock you out straight away and just make kind of Thunderous's time as a Dynamax kind of null and void.
Yeah, and one thing I've noticed about Daniel's playstyle as well is he really does take his time with all of these moves, making sure that every decision is really well thought out, thinking a couple of turns ahead and potentially towards the end game state, even here in turn one. And I think going for this turn one Dynamax with the Thunderous as well does just show that kind of intention to maybe try and get those speed advantages back up on Daniel's side of the field, going for something like those max airstreams. On Alejandro's side of the field, we're going to see a Dynamax as well. Pretty sure it's going to be that Glastrier, Lee.
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be, I think. It would be a bit strange to see the Indeedee, but I wouldn't be opposed to that. I would love to see that. But it is the Glastrier, Lou. It's going to come out and start putting big damage onto the field, and trying to stack up those chilling Nair boosts is what Glastrier needs to do if it can't get its weakness policy activated.
Yeah, I love these early kind of Dynamaxes because you get to really see sparks fly between the two Dynamax Pokemon, particularly with the helping hand coming out there from the Indeedee on Alejandro's side. Going to kind of go first before that Follow Me, and it allows that Glastrier to still be able to deal out some big damage. It is, however, going to be the Max Knuckle coming out from that Thundurus down into Glastrier. Oh, just only a little bit of damage, but the critical thing here for the Thundurus is it's going to get that +1 attack. Depending, though, obviously on Alejandro, that Follow Me is going to be bringing the move from the Glastrier down into the Indeedee, but the weakness policy has been activated. That was something, you know, Daniel, I'm sure, had considered in his calculations here. Maybe there's a plan to get that Glastrier down before it's able to utilize the weakness policy boost fully, but poor Indeedee, it's weakness policy boosted and there's a helping hand. That's going to deal a chunk of damage, and Indeedee's going to leave the field very quickly.
Yeah, poor Indeedee there, going down very quickly. But the big thing here for Alejandro is he's got that weakness policy activated. He's got the +1 from the Chillin' Naze. So this Glastrier now sitting on +3 attack. It's very dangerous. And without the redirection support that we saw in, you know, from the Indeedee, for that Thundurus, it's going to make quick work of the Thundurus. The Thundurus went that turn for the Max Knuckle, of course, maybe predicting that we'd see a Follow Me, and you take advantage of that Follow Me this turn, get an attack boost, so the next turn you can go for your Airstream, get a bit more damage off. But no redirection here has really hurt him if that wasn't his plan. You've got the Calyrex to come in now, and I think if you are Alejandro, it's not about concentrating down onto the Thundurus so much now, it's concentrating down into that Calyrex, removing that before you do anything else, because we saw how detrimental that could be to an endgame situation. If the Calyrex is still sticking around, and I know it was the Cinderace that kind of closed the game up, but I think, and I do feel like Cinderace is a lot more manageable if you've got than the Calyrex is, with that double target Astral Barrage or Expanding Force attack that we've seen it throughout so many times before.
Yeah, particularly as the Calyrex can utilize the Grimnay ability, can start boosting up its special attack. That's where it really gets to be quite formidable, particularly if it does get some kind of speed advantage with something like the Max Airstream. So I think you're right here, Lee. Alejandro really does need to make sure that he is targeting it down so that kind of towards the end game, it's not going to be so much of a threat. Indeedee going to go for that Follow Me, though, just wants to redraw in any moves coming up from this Thundurus. Calyrex once again going for the Expanding Force, wanting to make sure that Indeedee will be taking damage from its move in this particular turn. Max Airstream is going to be the choice coming out from the Thundurus, going straight down into that Indeedee, and it is of course enough to pick up the KO here and again give that speed boost to Daniel's Pokemon on the field. But this Glastrier is still yet to move, and it has all the boost that it needs. Whichever target it's going to come down on is going to be able to pick up a KO here, and Glastrier going for that Max Hailstorm is going to actually target down into that Thundurus.
Yeah, into the Thundurus once again, and removes the Dynamax threat, which to a certain extent makes sense, because then you prevent any more speed boosts onto your own Calyrex, because the Airstreams aren't really like a Tailwind, you know, they stay for the duration as long as that Pokemon is on the field until you switch it out. It's not like Tailwind, it's on a timer as soon as you set it up, so it does give you a bit more kind of security in that respect. So preventing those any more speed boosts is quite useful, especially if you're going to use Tailwind like we saw in that last game where Alejandro's bringing in the Whimsicott once again, going to try and take advantage of the Tailwind that it can provide and potentially make use of his own Calyrex when it comes onto the field. And keep in mind that there are only so many turns of the Psychic Terrain left, so that the Sucker Punch isn't so much of a threat going into the latter turns once the Calyrex comes on the field. But you've still got to think that the Glastrier is still on the field and it's still causing a lot of pressure, you know, it's still got those attack boosts, so it's not something that you can just freely ignore if you are Daniel.
Yeah, the Glastrier is certainly looking quite formidable, but the HP on that Glastrier as well is kind of dwindling down. It's below that 50%. So depending on what Daniel's going to be able to do, maybe try and stall out the Dynamax turn so that the HP is a little bit more manageable to try and pick up a KO. Could be critical here for Daniel, but Whimsicott, wouldn't be surprised to see it just go straight up for that Tailwind and just boost up the speed a little bit on that side of the field. Calyrex, however, just going straight for the Protect. I wonder if Cinderace is going to be jumping up into the sky as well. Whimsicott going straight for that Tailwind, so doubling the speed on Alejandro's side of the field, as the Cinderace does indeed go for Bounce. So again, we saw this in game 1 from Daniel. It's a really nice strategy to just kind of burn out that final turn of Dynamax. Cinderace being up in the sky now will be able to avoid it if that is who the Glastrier has targeted, but instead it's going to go down into that Calyrex from behind the Protect. How much is it going to do? Oh!
Wow! So much damage here, Lou. Nearly taking it out from behind the protector. It just goes to show the power of that Glastrier. And I think that was the difference from game one, you know, where Alejandro targeted in the Cinderace this time, thinking, no, I'm going after that Calyrex this turn, and really taking advantage of the protect here.
Yeah, and Calyrex now sitting very, very vulnerable, not only to Hail, but obviously to that Whimsicott as well. It's going to take advantage of that Tailwind, go for something like the Moonblast here. We'll be able to pick up a KO against that Calyrex.
Yeah, and I think that's what Alejandro does. Moonblast here and then attack with really any attack that you choose from the Glastrier, excluding high horsepower potentially, but you'll pick up the knockout onto the Cinderace pretty easily.
Yeah, Calyrex trying for that double protect, but to no avail. Whimsicott able to go for that Moonblast and connect onto the opposing Calyrex and get the KO, leaving Cinderace and the last Pokemon remaining here for Daniel. It's got to obviously return from the sky, goes for that bounce down into Whimsicott. It is enough to pick up the KO, but Glastrier yet to move, and now Cinderace is in its line of sight. Going to be able to go for that Icicle Spear and connect down onto that Cinderace, but only needs one of the Icicle Spear to take this to a game 3. Amazing play there from Alejandro.
Yeah, amazing comeback here to tie up the game, and incredible. And I love the single ice sphere there just to close out the game. You know, it doesn't need, it's a multi-target attack, and it only needs one. But yeah, like you said, Lou, an amazing way to kind of tie this game up, and probably really that execution there that we saw from Alejandro was probably what he's trying to do in that first game. It didn't really work out for him, but he corrected it. He adjusted his play there and made sure that, you know, I think, you know, I said probably concentrating down on the Calyrex earlier. I think personally what I said was probably a little bit wrong. I think what he did was perfect. Getting rid of the Thunderous at the right time meant that there wasn't going to be any more speed boosts from the max airstream. I didn't have to contend with that, get that off the field straight away, and then it puts the Shadow Calyrex on Daniel's side of the field in a way more precarious position. If you target it down that next turn, you get your Tailwind up, because you know that the Cinderace has to go for that bounce play, really, because it can't stay on the field. It needs to avoid the damage that turn to be able to get the damage the next turn while the Calyrex deals with the Glastrier. So then you've got the Sucker Punch active going forward from there. So excellently done from Alejandro, and that's great that we're going to get a game 3 from both of these players, because it's been an amazing set so far.
Yeah, it certainly has. There's so many twists and turns. One player gets the advantage and then the speed changes again, then the advantage switches sides. So let's just jump straight into game 3, Lee, and see exactly who is going to win this set. It's been phenomenal Pokemon play so far. I wonder what adjustments our players might make, or if we're going to see similar leads. Same thing coming out from Alejandro, Indeedee and Glastrier, whereas on Daniel's side of the field, again, Indeedee and the Thunderous. So really solid lead choices in all 3 games from our trainers here.
Yeah, and you can see, you know, both players have a game plan going into this. We've seen it in game 1 where it worked out for Daniel, and we saw it in game 2 where it worked out for Alejandro. So it's really on, you know, it can go very easily either way, depending on like these tiny fine margins within the game, and it's being able to pick those out as a player and kind of capitalize in those perfect opportunities. I think what Daniel's doing here, getting the speed control with these max airstreams to support the Calyrex when it does hit the field, utilizing Indeedee at the minute for that redirection. And maybe, you know, if you are Daniel here, you don't go for the max knuckle here. You kind of don't allow that weakness policy to be activated, because I think that was a big drawback for him in that game too. So it'd be unlikely to see that here unless he wants to try and get an attack boost and maybe go after the Indeedee this turn.
Yeah, it was certainly a difficult thing for Daniel to come back from, is activating the weakness policy on that opposing Glastrier. So interesting to see maybe the speed option coming back into the fray for Daniel here. But once again, it's going to be a double Dynamax from our trainers here, and I think it does make sense to go for this early strategy with the particular teams that we've got here. You want to be able to get the speed up on Thunderous's side, but then at the same time, to match such dynamic Pokemon such as Thunderous, you need to have your Glastrier on the field being able to pick up those strong KOs. And if you get your weakness policy activated at the same time, then it is a win-win. The Indeedees, however, going for a helping hand on the Indeedee on Alejandro's side once again, whereas the Indeedee on Daniel's side going for that follow me. So the exact same strategy coming out from game 2. This Glastrier is going to be formidable, Lee.
Yeah, and you know it's going to get the knockout onto Indeedee. This turn playing out a lot like it did in the previous games, you know. Just wanting to make sure if you are Alejandro, if the redirection, the follow me comes out from the opposing Indeedee, that you're giving yourself the best chance possible to knock it out, remove it off the field as soon as possible, because you've got to be, you know, you are counting on the Psychic Terrain staying present long enough for you to remove the Cinderace if you are getting to the point where Shadow Calyrex is eventually coming onto the field for you. And you know, the next turn, if you are Alejandro, you need to capitalize and remove that Thunderous from the field as quickly as possible, because as we've seen in the previous games, if it sticks around too long and it can support the Shadow Calyrex on Daniel's side with an additional speed boost, if it gets 2 speed boosts, 2 airstreams, that's probably going to be too much for, you know, Alejandro to really deal with in an endgame situation.
Yeah, and I think as well, being able to get that KO really strong there from the Glastrier. Last time it had its weakness policy activated, but this time all it needed was that helping hand boost and a critical hit to remove it from the field, already putting Daniel at this kind of Pokemon disadvantage. No surprises though that Calyrex is here on the field to try and capitalize on maybe some of the speed boosts that Thundurus can offer.
Yeah, the big difference here is the Glastrier has taken damage that last turn rather than the Indeedee on Alejandro's side. So the Indeedee in a lot better position here to kind of provide that supporting role with the follow me, so maybe able to actually survive this turn as well, especially if we don't see a redirection. I don't feel like it's a target for Daniel to go after, you know. It's not going to be something that he's prioritizing here. I think you're going to go after that Glastrier as hard as you can when you've got the opportunity to do like an airstream, but you've got to be careful at the same time, because if Alejandro decides not to target the Thundurus and go after the Calyrex here, then that could be quite detrimental as well. You know, you're not going to have that kind of powerful Pokemon to kind of help support you in the end game.
Well, Indeedee just going straight for a protector on Alejandro's side, wanting to make sure that it survives out the turn to be able to support possibly going into the next one. The speed boost, of course, going up on Daniel's side of the field as Calyrex once again takes advantage of the psychic terrain and goes for that expanding force. Indeedee going to protect itself from it, and we know that Glastrier already has the bulk to be able to take both those attacks. Glastrier going to follow up with that max Hailstorm and target right down, this time into the Calyrex, so avoiding the Thundurus altogether, just removing that Calyrex from the field that we know gave such difficulties to the Pokemon that Alejandro has in games 1 and 2. I think as well, having the Indeedee still on the field makes this Thundurus a little bit more manageable going into this next turn.
Yeah, it makes this whole game plan a lot more manageable. The Indeedee not taking that initial max airstream from the Thundurus means it has got the health to kind of stick around and pull in these big threatening single target attacks, and that's the big thing, the single target attacks that Daniel has left on the field now, not the double target attacks that he had with the Shadow Rider Calyrex. Now that's been removed, the Glastrier removing it from the field. This is going to be a lot easier because Glastrier now can get rid of the Thundurus, and then it's Cinderace versus the world, and if the Indeedee manages to stick around this turn, then it becomes very difficult to utilize the Sucker Punch, even if the Psychic Terrain leaves the field.
Yeah, exactly. You can see Daniel as well really trying to think through the turns. We can already see from his playstyle, he really is someone who's a very methodical thinker when it comes to these matches. So making sure that he's picking the exact moves needed to try and take this game 3. Because there's no more chances. It's game 3. The winner will stay on and the other one will drop down to the loser's bracket. Indeedee going to go for that redirection once again. It's going to be the max lightning coming out from the Thundurus though. Really wanting to jump on that fence and deal some good electric type damage. Also changes up the terrain a little bit as well. That could help out for that Cinderace on the field if it wants to go for those sucker punches a little bit later on. Pyro Ball is going to be the move choice from Cinderace though. Just going to be able to kick it over to the Indeedee and pick up the KO. So removing that destructive Pokemon from the field. But I think Indeedee did its job here protecting that Glastrier from any damage this turn, allowing it to go for its final max move, targeting down into that Thundurus. With all the boosts that it was able to get from the Chilling Day ability, it's going to be able to pick up that really solid KO.
Yeah, and a really nice play here from Daniel. You know, getting the electric terrain on the field now is quite nice. It kind of frees up the Cinderace to at least pressure the Shadow Rider Calyrex when it does come onto the field with maybe a Sucker Punch. But going to be very difficult going forward, you know, in this match, because you've got one. I don't know if the Cinderace has even got a single speed boost, because I think it came in after that. So I think it's neutral. The Whimsicott coming onto the field now can provide that tailwind support. And obviously, you can only hit one thing at a time with Cinderace, which is the problem against 3 Pokemon. I don't feel like you're going to have enough to really be able to remove all of these threats just one by one. Cinderace isn't the kind of the defensively built Pokemon that we know in some of the other Pokemon in the format to be so, you know, well versed at. It can't take the amount of attacks, and you know, the Glastrier right now with +3, it's going to be too much. We've seen already from game 2 how hard that one Icicle Sphere hits. So yeah, it's going to be a difficult spot for Daniel, really is. But Alejandro played this perfectly in this game.
Yeah, and I think particularly as well, if that Cinderace does go for something like the bounce, then it gets the flying type. That doesn't want to take any ice type moves at all, but it is indeed going for the bounce, wanting to get in on out of here for this particular turn, maybe hoping that the Glastrier is going to miss an attack potentially just trying to not get any damage down. But it's going to be obviously avoiding itself up there in the air, going to be able to survive that one out. Everyone's going to take a little bit of chip damage in terms of the Whimsicott and the Cinderace from the hail as well. But this is where things now do just get that a little bit more difficult. Like you said, Lee, Cinderace doesn't really win in the numbers game in terms of against more Pokemon on the field that can only really pick one target.
Yeah, and you're looking, if you are Dan, you're probably going into the Glastrier here and hoping that it's enough to pick up the knockout, which it should be. And then, you know, no Moonblast coming out from the Whimsicott here. You get the Tailwind up, which is great support to your Calyrex. It's going to come in the next turn, but the problem is the Sucker Punch from the Cinderace will maybe come down to what item that Alejandro has on his Calyrex. You know, if it was something like Focus Sash, then that really does help out in this situation, especially with the hail just stopping.
Yeah, I mean, one other interesting thing as well, if the Calyrex wants to go for something like a Protect, the Cinderace wants to go for that Sucker Punch, get the Dark type ability, that Dark typing, then something like that Moonblast coming out from the Whimsicott is going to be able to deal even more damage. So it is kind of the situation where these players really need to think through exactly how each turn is going to happen, the order that the Pokemon are going to be able to move in, and the repercussions of each of those moves to see what's going to be the outcome of the turn.
Yeah, you're making an amazing point there, Lou, with the Librero. If you do go for the Sucker Punch, you put yourself in a little bit of an awkward spot where that Moonblast will probably pick up the knockout from the Whimsicott. So what do you go for? Do you go for a Pyro Ball here, expecting the Calyrex to protect, remove the Whimsicott, and then that frees up the Sucker Punch the next turn? Or do you just go, be a bit bold and just go for the Sucker Punch and hope that you can take a Moonblast from the Whimsicott?
Oh, this is so intense, taking it down to the last couple of seconds. Does indeed go for the Sucker Punch. I did not see a Protect come out from that opposing Calyrex, so it's going to be able to connect and pick up the KO. This Cinderace has taken down 2 KOs in the face of 3 Pokemon, and I wonder what this Whimsicott is going to be able to do with the Moonblast. Is it going to be enough, Lee?
Is it going to be... Oh, and it is enough, which is really unfortunate because I love the bold play there from Daniel, but Alejandro there taking game 3, and what an amazing set.